Hello. Welcome to my channel Touching Stories. You're about to hear an amazing story about love and unexpected decisions. Enjoy watching. Winter evening. Frosty, beginning blizzard for each person is something different. Romantics admire the snow-covered trees whose branches look so beautiful against the dark sky. The motorists ride on the ice. Kids rejoice at the opportunity to fumble in the snow. Maybe poets will write a poem about how a storm covers the blue sky. But a lonely man, dressed out of weather, leaning on crutches, had no interest in romance or in the beauty of nature. He was cold. He was hungry. He wanted to find some shelter where he could sleep and not freeze to death. And what are you old men doing out in this weather? You should have stayed home. A well-dressed middle-aged man overtook him. The man with the crutch smiled mirthlessly. He was not an old man, probably even younger than the disgruntled citizen. In just 30 years, he would have been more than happy to be at home. Only he didn't have a home. He was a homeless bum. His name was Christian, and he wasn't offended by the passerby's rudeness. He was not that kind of man. He tended to blame himself for his own misfortunes, having been an orphan since birth. He did not know his parents. He lived in an orphanage. He lived in an orphanage. While he was young, he lived like all orphans. Not bad and not good. As it turned out, he didn't know any other life, so he thought everything was good, even if it was bad. And when he grew up, he started running away from the orphanage, not because it was unbearable or anyone offended him. He just loved his freedom. He didn't like to be in formation. He ate certain hours in the dining room that he was allowed to sleep and got up when he was told to. That's what he avoided. When he was little, he would come back when it was cold, when his clothes were worn out, when he had nothing to eat. We scolded him, but we accepted him, even though we knew that he would run away again. He didn't like studying at school either. That is why, when he grew up, he began to run during the cold season, and then he stopped coming back at all. So he became a free vagabond. Yes, it wasn't easy. But who's easy now? And who is to blame, really? Normal people came out of the orphanage, got some kind of education, housing, and lived like everyone else. Maybe it made sense to resent his own parents, about whom he knew nothing. They had left him as a baby, but who knew? Maybe it was for the best, that they had, if they were the kind of people who could abandon their own child, then maybe it was good that they weren't in his life. Well, Christian did not think about his parents, and he did not complain much about the driver who had hit him 6 months ago and ran away from the scene of the accident either. After all, it was his own fault. He should be more careful. Moreover, he did not go to the medical center to treat his broken leg. He took comfort in the fact that some acquaintance, also a tramp, told him that he knew how to treat it. He himself had broken both legs and arms many times, and everything remained fine. And to these doctors, you can't go anywhere without hands or without legs. If they see you're a bum, they'll start doing experiments on you, and that's what we'll do. So I bandaged up his leg and tied some planks on it. It healed. It did heal. Apparently it still hurts, and he can't walk for a long time without crutches. You could have gone to a trauma center, and somehow it was treated there without any experiments. There was one person who had a grudge against the janitor. Christian was used to sleeping in the same basement. Last winter he was fine there, and this fall he came as if he were at home. And the old janitor had nothing against it. If there's money for a bottle, he's happier too. And then the old man quit. Or they fired him for his addiction to liquor. Some new guy showed up. He put a big padlock on the cellar door. He also repaired the doors, so you can't open it by yourself, even if the new owner of the yard isn't around. Wherever you want, you can sleep there, mine. What business is it of yours? I see he does not care. And the frost has started. And now where to go? Yes, he was homeless, but he never stole anything. He tried to earn an honest living, and if he couldn't, he made do and didn't drink much. My soul didn't take it. But he was not in the habit of wishing to. On the contrary, he tried to keep the place where he had to live clean. And now, please, there was nowhere to live. When it is frosty and there is a snowstorm and blizzard, and you have no place to stay, here you were, Christian, not knowing where you were going. You just walked as long as your legs carried you, and they took you to the end of the street, where it seemed to be impossible to find anything. But no, there was a house on the corner. It wasn't much, really. No one had lived there for a long time, and it had been abandoned. But there was nothing else to look for. Tired. His shoulder was sore from the crutches. It was cold, and he was glad, even such a house. At least you can shelter from the wind and snowstorms, which were getting stronger. If only the door were open. Of course, no one had locked it in a long time. It gave way easily to the man's hand. Christian went in, lay down. Uncomfortable, dark, cold, and hungry. He had, honestly, stashed some bread on the edge for supper, something to chew on before he went to bed, and it was a good walk through the house, surveying the well-timed dwelling. People moved out of here, apparently, a long time ago. And if the owners left something here that was suitable for life, it was either taken out or spoiled completely. And once it was a house, like a house, like a house. There's even a stove in the kitchen. We could try to heat it up if we could find something that looked like fuel. But there was plenty of that here, pieces of furniture, bits of wood. Paper, old rags would do in the end. The rooms were empty too. But okay, we could sleep here. Christian went out into the kitchen again, wanting to examine the stove. There was no light, of course. But he had matches, though he did not smoke. What could a homeless man do without matches? Just for such an occasion, one must have a match. He went into his pocket, but then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Of course, it did not become brighter, but from behind some door like a faint light, and even heard some sounds behind the door, judging by the best of times, was a closet. And now in it for sure, who was someone, but who? Hey, who stepped to the door? Christian asked. He was not a timid man. His circumstances did not make him a coward, but he was not a man of unreasonable courage either. To be on the safe side, he gripped his crutch tightly in his hand. He stepped to the door, behind which someone was, and called out again. In the corner, a 10-year-old boy was sitting on some crate, playing with some kind of modern toy. Christian had no idea. He had never had any computers, smartphones, or tablets himself, and he had no idea how to use them. But he often saw kids and teenagers staring at that little screen, oblivious to everything around them. This kid, by all appearances, was also fascinated by it, and some part of the pantry was illuminated by the screen, his toys. And in this wrong light, you could see that the boy was dressed quite nicely. He was clearly not a waif. "Hey, kid, what are you doing here?" Christian asked loudly, trying to distract the boy from his activities. The child flinched, looked up, and looked frightened at first, but quickly calmed down when he realized there was nothing to fear from this man. "I am not doing anything. I am sitting. I ran away from home and do not want to go back." "And why is that?" Christian was surprised. "Well, he's run away more than once himself. But not from his own home, from a government house. If he had had a mother and father, maybe he wouldn't have run away," asked the boy. "Do you have parents?" "Off," the boy answered. "I have a mother, no father, and a stepfather in his place. That's who I ran away from." "I see. Is it better to freeze here in an empty house than in an apartment?" "It's probably warm. There's food, a bed, and everything you need. Besides, my mom's there. Why can't she protect me? And he's a sneaky bastard. He's in front of her, and in front of people, and he's such a good daddy that I'm her. And if anyone turns their back, he's all over me. Well, it's not for me to judge, of course. I ain't never had no parents, neither siblings nor cousins. I'd better try to heat up the stove now. And in the morning when the snowstorm's over, I'll walk you home. You better call your mother, though, or write a letter." "How do you do it?" "I don't know. I've never had a phone like that." "Who are you?" the kid finally asked. "Do you live here?" I've never seen you before. No. I used to live somewhere else, but they kicked me out. Actually, I'm homeless. Why homeless? Because I like to run away from the orphanage, too. That's why he wanted me to call you. You call me, I'll go and heat the stove. No, I'd rather write. If I call, he'll scream right away. Start calling me to come home and stuff. Let's not cheat, or the police will be all over us. They'll find us here and send us away. My name's Christian, by the way. What's yours? I'm Alex. The boy started Boyko, pointing his finger at the screen. I wrote it all down and turned my smartphone off so she wouldn't call. By the way, the police might find out where the message was sent from. They'll find us. Then where would they send us? Well, you go home, of course, but they might send you to a children's home. Me to the adults, that's for sure. But let's hope not. We don't have to go anywhere. The stove's been warm. A pleasant warmth began to spread through the house. Christian felt responsible for the boy, who knew what was going on in their house. Many people he knew complained at the orphanage. Many more ran away from home because of it. Some were taken back. He didn't want to interrogate the child, so Christian set up a shelter for the night by the stove. So he cleared a piece of the floor, put his coat on it, and said, "Lie down here. You must be hungry. I have nothing. Just some bread. Would you like some?" He handed it to the boy. "What about you? Let's at least share it." If I had known, I would have brought something from home. But I didn't have time. I left too soon. I had something with me. A chocolate bar, half a bag of chips. But I ate it all. All right, we'll make do with the bread for now. You can go home tomorrow. They'll feed you there. Where will you go? Where will you eat? Alec, but sleep wouldn't come. He thought about this boy, his fate, though no, he would probably be all right. Children often resent their parents, but then it passes. Alex's parents, by all accounts, aren't so bad. And the boy is dressed well, and his toys are expensive, modern. And his upbringing, by all appearances, was not bad. Didn't say one rude word. Well, there's a problem with the stepfather. Well, his mother's always there for him if it's serious. So I guess you can take it easy on the kid. Nothing terrible will happen to him. He won't end up in an orphanage, and he certainly won't become a vagrant. He'll rebel a little, and then he'll calm down. He'll go to school. He'll study. He'll grow up to be a normal person. I wonder if I could be normal. Or would I just wander around for the rest of my life? Christian thought about it, but he dismissed the thought. Yes, they came up sometimes. What could you do about them? But he couldn't find an answer. When they got up in the morning, the weather had cleared and Alex was going home, not really looking forward to it. He chattered on the way. I'll tell my mom that I don't want to live with the stepfather, but she still won't believe that he's hurting me. So it's my own fault and I'll stay. Are you going to live in this house? I'll come again. Do you mind? No, of course, come. I'll be glad to. I guess I'll stay for now. Where else can I go? Just don't spend the night. I won't. Come with me, as if we were visiting. No, Alex, I'm not going. You go and I'll mind my own business. Christian was embarrassed to go into such a rich house, and he was afraid that no one would think anything of it. He imagined the boy's mother, probably a beautiful, well-groomed lady, screaming her crooked, painted lips. Christian himself really went about his business. He really never stole. He tried to earn a living somehow. He'd give up iron or bottles or cans. In a word, he'd take any part he could get. He used to be a longshoreman. What kind of a loader was he now with a crutch? Still, he managed to find some small things at the market. Not even for money, but for food. In the evening, he returned to the same house, though he knew it was an unreliable shelter. Other homeless people could come in at any moment. Not like them, but much more dangerous. Drinkers, for example, who fought and tried to involve him in their activities. Even worse were drugs, which Christian had always tried to stay away from. He was a loner in general. He thought it was easier that way. Though what easy was easy, Alex wasn't fooled. A couple of days later, he went to see his new friend. "Did you get in a lot of trouble at home for running away?" Christian asked. "Not really, but I had to promise that I wouldn't run away again, and that I would always sleep at home. And I always keep my word when I promise. They say my dad always did that. He was a reliable man. I think he drowned. Only I don't remember him at all. And my stepdad, he burned all his pictures or threw them away or hid them somewhere. I don't know. I asked my mom. She says she doesn't know either. She didn't. So I didn't even see what he looked like. But everybody that knew him, they say he was a good man. I think so too. Didn't get along with your stepdad, did you? I'm not going to get along with him. He's an asshole, all right. I don't want to know him. I don't want to know him. I told my mom if he stays with us, I'll grow up and leave home. Let her stay with him forever. He's the real deal. His name is Frank. Uncle Christian, I brought you some presents." He took a bag out of his pocket. It had sausage sandwiches, cheese sandwiches, and meatballs in it. "You shouldn't have done that at all. What did you take out of the house?" Christian was embarrassed. "What do you mean you stole it? It's like I ate it myself. It's not a big deal. You know how many things get thrown away. Besides, you gave me a treat. And now I have to, don't I?" "Right. But you better not take any more out of the house." "It's no use. I don't know what my parents will think. I also went to the canteen today. There's one where they give free food, but I can work part-time too, so it's no big deal. I'm not hungry." Christian dragged in a perfectly good blanket that served as his mattress. He didn't like going through landfills, but lately there had been a lot of nice things left near the dumps that people just didn't want anymore. They didn't throw them into the general dumpster, where anything could really go to waste, but just left them next to the dumpster. That way it was possible to be useful and find something to equip one's life. The welfare of the people was growing. Sometimes Christian thought derisively, "Everyone complains that they have no money, and sometimes they throw away brand new things." He and Alex had a good meal and chatted while everyone talked about their lives. The boy noticed the blanket and said, "You must be sleeping comfortably now. Won't you take me for a sleepover?" He laughed. "Of course," and Christian wagged his finger at him. "Look, you promised you'd sleep at home, didn't you? And then you keep your word." "Yeah, I know, I'm kidding. But I'll come back. I like your place. My stepfather's home right now. My mom's not home yet. She's working." The boy really began to stop by Christian's house every day, bringing something every time. Sometimes he brought something from home, and sometimes he bought something delicious on the way to the store. Christian refused. He didn't feel comfortable. He was an adult after all, and he would take the baby's food. Especially if he took it from home, his parents might notice and think something. And they did. That is, they didn't know what to think, but they couldn't help noticing the child's strange behavior, going somewhere, sneaking groceries out of the house, spending her pocket money on who knows what. Earlier, it was clear that he was buying some toys or sweets, but now I don't know what. "It's all because of you, Frank." Veronica told her husband. She was beginning to guess that there were serious problems between her son and his stepfather. "You really must be losing yourself to him. He runs away from home, and I'll find out where he goes. Don't worry." "What do you mean? I'm picking on him anyway. I'm supposed to communicate with him somehow. I'm not a piece of furniture in your house, and I'm not his father, but I'm not a stranger. It's a shame that after all these years you haven't become at least close to him. A child will not just dislike an adult with whom he lives in the same house. Such quarrels between spouses were becoming more and more frequent, and it worried Frank a great deal. It wasn't that he loved Veronica so much that he couldn't live without her. But the alliance of this woman was necessary primarily for business reasons. and everything could be ruined because of a silly boy with whom it was completely impossible to make contact. It's even strange why he hangs on every word. Could it be that he felt something? So the stepfather decided to follow Alex's movements and find out where he went all the time. Maybe it's more complicated than that, and someone's turning him against the family. He was already being rude to his mother. What Frank didn't know was that Veronica had had the same thoughts. She wanted to know where her son went, too. After all, he was just a kid. He might have ended up in some company. Someone there might teach him bad things or hurt him. Who better than his mother to see to it? So they decided, without talking, to find out where Alex was going. When he once again got ready and tried to sneak out of the house unnoticed, Frank came out a little later and followed, trying to keep out of his sight. He did not know that Veronica was following him. He kept his eyes on the boy. He hadn't realized his wife might be doing the same, so he didn't notice her. And Alex didn't look around much. He didn't think she might be followed. He walked to the house where his adult companion lived, which had already become familiar and almost native. Every boy dreams of having such a friend, and happy are those who have a father or an older brother. But Alex had no such people around him, and that place in his life was taken by a homeless Christian. He approached the house and only glanced around for a moment, but seeing nothing suspicious, he went inside. Christian was there, and he was glad for his friend, who had also taken up no small place in his lonely heart. He was a grown man who also needed some kind of affection, someone to take care of, and Alex was perfect in that regard. But this time the meeting didn't happen. No sooner had the kid closed the door behind him than someone outside her ripped at him and took him by the hand. It was the stepfather. "What do you want in this dump? And you little shit. You resent me for picking on you. I'm not picking on you now. Let go of me. It's none of your business where I go. You're not my father, and I don't want to know you." Alex was tearing himself away. Christian, who was sitting in the kitchen, heard the yelling. He got out of them. "Let the boy go, don't touch him. He's not doing anything wrong." Frank turned toward him, clenched his fists, and was about to apparently start a scuffle. But suddenly his hands dropped. He stared at Christian. "I can't believe my eyes." And then, as if he recognized him, "So that's it. You're not dead, so you're a bastard. Well, you didn't succeed that time, did you? So I'm going to kill you now. I threw you off the boat. But people like you don't drown. That's all right. Let's see you and this shitty house go up in flames. No one will recognize you or find you. You shouldn't have counted on that." He went at Christian but got hit in the forehead with a crutch. A scuffle ensued, making the man not immediately notice Veronica, who stood outside the door in bewilderment for some time, listening to what was going on. Now she came in and froze, too, as if she had seen a ghost. Taking advantage of this, Frank jumped out of the house. Veronica, regaining her wits, threw herself around Christian's neck. "My darling Victor, you're alive. Why didn't you come to me? I was so sad without you. What were you putting me up for?" the woman cried, kissing the bum. Christian didn't dare support her behind her back, afraid she would faint, and didn't understand what was happening. Neither did Alex understand anything. Veronica turned to her son. "Alex, honey, it's your daddy. Look at your daddy. You found him yourself. What a blessing. Whoa. Whoa, friends, I don't understand. I'm going crazy," Christian himself exclaimed. "I'm sorry, girl. And I wasn't pushed from any boat. I've never been on one, and I've never seen you before. I'm going crazy myself. Who did we bury? Well, who cares? The main thing is that you're alive. I see you've lost your memory. You must have drowned, oxygen deprivation in your brain or something. It'll all come back to you in there. Don't worry about it. Why do you have a crutch? Why are you limping? Did you break your leg? Turns out Frank the bastard pushed you over. Uncle Christian, are you my dad? Alex wondered. Of course, Christian wasn't his father. He was a homeless orphan, a former orphanage resident. He remembered it well, even though he'd been traumatized in a variety of ways in his complicated life. Tell me, didn't you have a head injury? You don't remember anything. Do you remember when we had Alex? Here's the ring. You gave it to me for his birth. Do you remember how we met? Sorry, Veronica, I assure you again, I have not lost any memory. I remember everything. I lived in an orphanage. I was an orphan. I was never married. And Alex, unfortunately, is not my son, although he's a great guy. But you look like him. Maybe someone hypnotized you. No one hypnotized me. You just made a mistake. Maybe I do look like someone. Do you still have any pictures of your husband? Exactly, no, I don't. The bastard took them all away. My mother must have some. Don't you remember your mother? You lived with her. I've never seen any mothers. Believe me, you're just hysterical. Take a sedative and everything will go back to normal. Yeah, it was hard to believe what was going on. But how could it be? After all, Victor had no brothers. He was his parents' only son. I should call my mother-in-law. Maybe she could clear things up. Just be careful. She's got a heart condition, and we haven't spoken since then. Well, maybe you had brothers. I didn't have any, Christian answered tiredly, remembering the circumstances of his unhappy past. It was Victor, the only and favorite son of intelligent, wealthy parents, who had the happiest childhood, studying in an elite school of music, chess, gymnastics. His father, a successful businessman, was able to provide all this for his only son. And Victor really grew up a happy boy, everyone's favorite. Every summer, he was sent to some prestigious sanatorium. But you see, he didn't like it there very much. He was looking forward to a much more interesting trip to his grandmother's village. That's where he learned the real Will. Riding his bike day in and day out playing soccer with the neighborhood boys, exploring the surrounding woods and the neighbors' gardens and orchards, swimming, fishing in the local river. It's now dwarfed, overgrown with paint and ready to turn into a ravine. But then it was a real river, from which no one left without a good catch. Not for nothing the locals called it their breadwinner. There was enough fish not only to feed their families, but also to sell. From the village, Victor would come back and persuaded his parents not to send him to any more sanatoriums. In the countryside is much better and more interesting and healthier and tastier, he said. And then he grew up, went to university, and the time to travel anywhere. It became catastrophically short. He tried to get away to his favorite places, at least for a week every summer, but it became less and less common. Victor finished his studies and soon got a good position in the company created by his father. But after he met Veronica at a party, he had to forget all about traveling. Love took hold of him head first. Soon they were married, and from the very first days of their life together, it became clear how his meeting with Veronica was not accidental. They were a remarkably harmonious, beautiful, young couple. Victor sometimes still sighs for the village, and once even went there with his young wife, but that was his last visit. Grandmother soon gone, there was no one to go to. And then my father left. Victor had to take his position as head of the company. When the young couple had Alex, Dad was very sad that his son would not have such a fun vacation. Otherwise, everything was fine. Victor successfully developed his father's business. The income was growing and the young family could only be envied. Yes. Victor and Veronica were sure of their happy future, maybe even too much so. But life ended abruptly and tragically. One day, when Alex was already a few months old, Victor's companion, Frank, offered the young father a trip on the river in a small yacht. Victor refused at first. He didn't want to leave his young wife and child alone, though he wanted to rest and get some fresh air. He hadn't been away for a long time. He was used to such annual getaways. and Veronica, apparently understanding her husband's desire, told him herself, "Why do you refuse to eat? You can't just work and stay at home all your life." "What about me and Alex? I'm doing just fine. You know that. You're not going away for a year. Nothing will happen to us in a few days." And nothing really happened to them. It happened to Victor. He fell overboard the other boats, but they couldn't save him, no matter how hard they tried. The body was found a few days later. The forensic examination unequivocally showed that the young man had drowned. There were no other injuries on the body, so his companions didn't suspect anything. Veronica was now hysterical, now frozen, as if she had died herself. She sat there with her eyes open, not looking anywhere. She couldn't even see little Alex, couldn't hear him. "Thank you." Girlfriends helped, looked after the baby, didn't let him disappear. Mother-in-law Anna found solace in the fact that she blamed everything on her daughter-in-law. She wasn't interested in her grandson either. What did she need him for? Anna lost everything, her only son. Immediately after the funeral, she was taken to the hospital. Someone there must have decided to finish her off. They called and said that Veronica's baby was not Victor's, but the very same companion Frank's. Mother Anna had long suspected something like that. That's how the puzzle came together. The serpent daughter-in-law had sent her husband for a walk on the river. With whom? With a lover, whose fault was the son killed. The lover's fault. They both knew that Victor couldn't swim, but they encouraged him to take that stupid walk. So Anna didn't need Snake, her daughter-in-law with her third. She left the hospital and went straight to the notary. Everything she had, she signed over to distant relatives and to the church, so that nothing of the serpent's tribe would get there. Of course, Veronica had already managed to get a lot, taking advantage of her son's love and trust. Well, let her use it, especially since she's not hiding it. Frank's a murderer, and he's hanging around her when her husband's legs aren't even cold yet. Anna even tried to report him to the police, but they wouldn't take her statement. "I'm sorry, but that's just your unsubstantiated suspicion. There's no evidence. Your son died in an accident. He couldn't swim. You admit that to yourself. There were no injuries on him. Finding someone looking after the dead man's widow doesn't mean anything. It's only natural. Do you know how many marriages are like this?" That's the kind of police she got. If Anna had been healthier forces, she would have achieved initiation of criminal proceedings. But, alas, she didn't have the strength for that fight. And Frank really was always there for the young widow. At first, of course, there was no question of a relationship. He was there as a compassionate friend of a woman going through a great grief. In addition, he felt responsible for the death of his comrade. At least he often talked about it. "It was my fault. I persuaded him to go, and then I was there for him and didn't save him." "Stop it. He went because I told him I was as much to blame as you. But we didn't want Victor to die." "I still don't believe that. I mean, it's possible that he survived." "Yes?" Despite the fact that the body was found and buried, the poor woman couldn't believe her husband's death and waited a long time for his return. She didn't know how to live without him. There were no other close relatives. Her mother-in-law did not want to apologize. Veronica was left all alone without a soulmate by her side. She didn't know much about her husband's business, and here Frank's help was needed, though she was in no hurry to give him all the rights. And even years later, already married to Frank, Veronica continued to be the head of the company. By this time, she had learned a lot. But Frank hadn't given up hope either. After all, he was the one who had tried to cut off all of Veronica's connections with friends and family. He called his former mother-in-law, told her that Alex was not Victor's son. He believed that one day he would own the whole firm, and then he would be able to think about another wife, younger and, most importantly, without the trailer. Maybe he could have stayed with Veronica if it wasn't for the boy, who was becoming more and more unbearable with each passing year, and who had assiduously quarreled his mother with him, Frank. So Christian learned some details about the life of his double. But nothing answered the main question. How was it possible that the two people happened to be so similar to each other? Without Victor's mother, it was hard to make sense of this case. But Veronica was in no hurry to call. Give me her phone number. I'll call her myself and ask her straight out whether she had one son or twins. And if so, why did she give up one of them? Well, it's up to you what happens. The heirs might even be happy. Don't do that, Christian. She may not be a very nice woman, but there's no point in taking her to the point you're talking about, said Veronica reproachfully. Then Alex, who was also taking part in these conversations, took the floor. Let me call my grandmother, even if she doesn't think I'm her grandson. But it's not like I'm guilty of anything, is it? Here, I'll ask her for a picture of Daddy to send to her phone, and we'll compare. Maybe he doesn't look so much like him. It just seemed to you. Then it seems like we're arguing for nothing here. Frank felt the same way. Well, it's not a bad idea at all. So he did. Alex dialed the number, and Anna was strangely pleased with his call. She still didn't want to acknowledge her grandson. Even more, she didn't want to admit she was wrong. But still, the lonely life she had had enough of. Her relatives, having learned about the will at first, gave her at least some attention, but lately they began to forget and even talk to her on the phone without any desire. In fact, what to pamper her grandmother, if the will is written anyway in her long life? No one was particularly interested. When she found out that Alex wanted to see a picture of her father, she cried, "So your mother threw away all the pictures of Victor, too? What a bitch!" Sobbing came out the poor woman. It wasn't her grandma. It was Frank who assured her grandson, and who brought him into the house. She let him run the place. "Now, honey, I'll send you a picture, and you can send me one of yourself." It turned out that her grandmother was quite good at modern technology, and soon sent her grandson several pictures of his father, including the most recent ones. Christian saw himself in them 10 years ago. But back then he wasn't as happy, well, dressed and successful. It seriously upset him. Give me her phone number. I have the right to talk to her, if she really is my mother. I almost don't doubt that anymore. That resemblance really can't be accidental. Wait, Uncle Christian. Let me tell you right now that I met someone who looks a lot like my father and asked her if she has any relatives. Maybe you're really not the son, just some great nephew. Alex was wiser than the adults in this conversation. Well, let's at least put it that way. Although, frankly, I don't see any reason to be particularly coy with a woman who abandoned her child intransigently, Christian said. Alex sent some pictures of himself to his grandmother. She immediately called back. Their conversation resumed, Anna acknowledged. Alex looked a lot like his father and seemed to believe that the boy really could be her grandson. She wanted to talk, she wanted to meet him, and Alex was generally okay with that. But he needed to talk about why, in fact, he had resumed communication with his grandmother. Contrary to Veronica's fears, the older woman was much tougher than she might have seemed. When she heard that Alex had met a strange man who looked like her father, she did not faint, though she was very excited. Where did you meet him? And who was this man? Believe me, Alex, I'd really like to see him too. It's a long story, you know, and you're too young to know everything. But if you see him again, could you tell him to get in touch with me? I can, Grandma. He can right today, if you don't mind, the boy said today. Oh my God, Alex, that can't be. And I can see him. The woman couldn't believe her ears. She was very excited. And there were reasons for that, as it turned out. Yes, sure, Grandma, and I'll come with him right away. All right. The boy turned gleefully to his mother and winked at Christian. I think it's too good for me. Well, yes, I have to tell him everything that happened a long time ago, back when I was young. Please come and bring your mother too. I have to apologize to her. Alex, I'm sick. I'd come and see you myself. I can't do that. They packed up quickly and drove off. When she saw Christian, Anna still clutched at her heart. She cried, "My son, my son, my son." The woman spoke in a weak voice, unable to take her eyes off the man who had entered. Veronica rushed to look for medicine. Then she made tea, seated everyone at the table. After calming down a little, the hostess began her story. "I'm sorry, son. What happened? My fault. I will not make excuses. Apparently, I trusted the wrong people. I did not take care of you, and I did not look for you well." "But what happened?" Christian asked. He was rather skeptical about what he was about to hear. He was sure his mother had simply given up on him. "I had a great friend, Beatrice. We'd been together since we were kids, and we were kind of evenly matched. And then I married your grandfather, Alex, and your father, Christina. He wasn't a poor man back then. He came from a very prominent family. His father held some kind of office. So Beatrice and I were in different positions. I didn't think much of it. I thought we would remain friends. But somewhere, she began to be jealous and even threatened that her husband would leave me anyway, and I would be left with nothing. When I gave birth to twins, she went completely crazy. As soon as I checked out of the hospital, she stole one child right out of the stroller. Every time I turned my back. I don't know what she wanted to do with it. They caught her pretty quickly, but the baby was no longer with her. I don't know where it went. They put her in a psychiatric hospital, but never treated her. That's where she lived the rest of her life. Now she's gone. And they searched and searched for the child, but they never found her. When they caught her, she talked a lot of nonsense, and then she confessed that she had thrown him into the river. But didn't they think to look in orphanages? Christian was indignant. This was all happening in the same city. They looked for him, my son. Then they settled down on the fact that she must have really drowned him. I mean, you. I was ill for a long time, and after that I couldn't calm down. But then I somehow forgot myself. What could I do? And then my second son also died in the river. I think that was karma, but that was my fate. I have already called the notary. I'll rewrite the will today. I'm such a fool. I signed it all over to my ungrateful nephews so Veronica wouldn't get it. I can't find them now. If I call them, they'll almost curse me. So I'll leave everything to you now. You can learn, or whatever you want to live on. There's enough there for 3 centuries. I just need to get my leg fixed, Christian said. We'll get it done, honey. I got your papers. We'll fix you up, and you'll have everything you need. Veronica and Alex went home, having decided to leave their mother and son alone. They still had a lot to talk about. Christian was amazed at the change in his life. A few hours ago, he was a bum, and now he had a mom, a millionaire mom, for whom all avenues were open. Veronica's soul, too, was a mess. She wasn't answering questions in the right way. Alex pondered what would happen to her now. After all, she was still technically the wife of Frank, who by all appearances was indeed responsible for Victor's death of her husband. He had confessed to this himself, unaware that she was hearing all his words. All in all, it all makes sense. She needs to work out a divorce with him and get out of this horrible forced marriage without much loss. When she arrived home, she realized that Frank had already made arrangements for himself. He had moved his belongings out of the house, and not just his. Fortunately, he didn't know the code to the safe, where all her jewelry, cash, and papers were kept, and couldn't open it. Veronica sighed and sat back in her chair, wondering what to do with her future life. Mom, so now Uncle Christian is my real uncle. Yes, that's right, she answered absently. I really hope so. Okay, Alex, you must be hungry. No, I'm not. There's too much news in general. I'm most happy for Uncle Christian. He won't have to sleep in that awful house anymore. And he'll probably get his leg fixed. Grandma said she has money. Yes, everything must be all right. The mother answered hopefully. A new life had indeed begun for Christian. It was unfamiliar and exciting. He lived in a big, rich house. He had a mother. Anna enthusiastically took it upon herself to take care of her son, and soon his affairs did indeed improve considerably. In the evenings they had long conversations telling each other about their lives. The mother had to shed many tears over the stories of her son growing up away from her. "How could I believe that you were gone? I mean, there was money. You could have stepped up your search, and I had resigned myself to a life of giving up. I'm sorry. I don't have anything to be sorry about." At first he could hardly squeeze the word mother out of him, but he quickly got used to it, feeling from a strange woman at first a real motherly love. With the help of lawyers, she quickly got him papers and soon got him into the best-paid clinic to perform surgery on his legs. The doctor promised a full recovery. In the meantime, Christian lay in the hospital. Frank couldn't calm down, accept his defeat, and from whom? From a stupid boy and some dirty bum. At first he was sure it was Victor who had somehow survived, but after calming down and thinking everything over, he realized it was impossible, and he was so reckless in front of him and Veronica, who happens to be eavesdropping outside the door, confessed to the murder he had committed, even though he would face no legal penalty for it. It is clear that his relationship with Veronica is over, as well as his business reputation and people's opinion of him in general. And all this because of a homeless boy who in addition turned out to be a relative of that old fool, Victor's mother, who took him into her house and, it seems, made him heir to her considerable fortune. Where is the justice? He had done so much to enrich himself. All at once he lost everything, and the damn bum became a millionaire. No, Frank was not going to put up with that. Somehow Frank found out where his enemy was and decided that this was his chance to get what he wanted. And why not? After all, it had gone so smoothly once. He'd gotten away with it. Surely now luck would be on his side too. Yes, Frank must have been somewhat tormented in his mind, thought he had to destroy Christian, and after him Alex as well. It didn't bode well for him financially, but he couldn't handle the hatred he felt for the man. He sneaked into the room when the patient had not yet fully recovered from anesthesia, with his legs stretched out, lying there completely helpless and not even suspecting anything. Perhaps this treacherous plan would have succeeded completely. But a young nurse came into Casey's room. It was her job to check on patients after surgery. As she entered, she froze in horror at the first moment as she saw Frank covering the patient's head with a pillow and strangling him, muttering, "Die already, die." The days wore off quickly. She wasted no time in screaming for help. There was no telling when help would arrive, and she was counting in minutes. Casey grabbed the chair next to the bed and hit Frank over the head. He lost consciousness, and the nurse rushed to the patient, hoping to give him timely first aid. Christian was not particularly hurt by Frank's actions. Neither was the intruder himself from the blow with the chair. He quickly regained consciousness, but was disarmed by a guard and nurse who came running in on the noise, and the police were called. The killer was arrested, and it soon became clear he would have to answer for the assassination attempt, and possibly the one 10 years earlier. He wasn't leaning in front of the police already, throwing a tantrum during which he confessed to what he had done. It is unknown what the charges will be in court, but in any case it would be a long time before he was released. Veronica and Alex were relieved that their new friend and relative had been spared such grave danger. They were also relieved that Frank had finally disappeared from their lives, and now they could not fear that he would cause any trouble. It was a possibility, after all, and given what he had decided to do, there was no doubt that he would want to get even with his ex-wife and stepson. Christian was on the mend quickly, and soon he was walking the halls of the hospital on his own feet, albeit uncertainly. During his treatment, he became very close to that nurse, Casey. Anna was happy. She was finally free of her boring loneliness. She now had so many people close to her. Veronica, her grandson Alex, visited her often and talked to her daily on the phone. In addition, she had a son and now would have a second daughter-in-law. and she hoped for new grandchildren as well. If you liked the story, I hope for your support with a thumbs up button for you just one click away. But it's extremely important to me. Thank you in advance and goodbye.